gentlemen, our next comedian is that famous duo you all know and love, Ernest T. Cooterwater and Pokey. Hey, howdy, folks. How y'all doing tonight? What a good-looking crowd we got here. You know, except for you, sir. You look like a bull on cow milking night, am I right? Well, gals and fellas, I obviously didn't come alone tonight. I brought my friend Pokey here. And as you'll find out, Pokey's a little rough around the edges. Ain't that right, Pokey?
Beware the Ides of March, for it is the arrogant who shall fall.
Okay, Pokey, take it easy, take it easy. Now, you know, folks, Pokey and I went to the hardware store the other day, and there was a man there, some city slicker. I think you folks know the type. Anyway, he was looking to buy a Metabo HPT 10-inch compound miter saw, single bevel with a 15-amp motor, but instead, he done picked up a Metabo HPT multi-volt, 18-volt variable speed cordless reciprocating saw. Ain't that right, Pokey?
Pray that I succeed in my quest, as I have seen the throne of the gods, and it was empty.
Now look, Pokey may look like one, but let's face it, I ain't no dummy. So, Pokey, before we get out of here, why don't you tell all these fine folks what it's like being an otherworldly ventriloquist dummy living in a chest all the time?
The witching hour is upon us, and nigh is the end. As humanity gasps for its last breaths of life, the eternal darkness envelops all.
Thank you, folks. This has been Ernest T. Cooterwater and Pokey. Check out our hour-long special, available now on Quibi. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Boob Tube Boys, and I am your host this week. I guess the third time this week, fourth time this week, technically, Van Lee, and I'm joined, of course, by Stencil Hendricks. Welcome, Spencer. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fine. Brian, you're also joining us. Brian Vaughn.
That is Bizarro Brian. Man, I don't have any hair on me at all on my body.
You're so toned
My vision
and hairless.
is awesome.
And you're just so cool. That was a dig.
Wait a second.
Yes, that's right. We're covering, if you couldn't tell, Season 8, Episode 3, The Bizarro Jerry of Seinfeld during this Seinfeld week.
Seinfeld week!
And this is another Season 8 episode that we're going to cover. We just talked Kenny Rogers, the chicken roaster.
Yeah, one of us respects Larry David.
It's funny that we did take 2 Season 8 episodes. I kind of somewhat feel like, hey, maybe we should have had more diversity and picked other ones, but also I'm like, no.
I like this
Seinfeld,
approach, and also I'm saying this, as we like to do, I'm just saying this in front of everyone. In front of everyone. I mean, they've downloaded the podcast. We may revisit Seinfeld at some point. Who even knows? It's one of those kinds of things for us.
Okay, let me ask this before we get into this episode.
Yeah.
Of the 3 episodes we're going to cover, Spencer, how would you rank them? Which is your favorite and which is your least favorite?
That's
hard.
really hard. This one was my least favorite, the one that you're going to be doing here. Again, for the same reasons the last one. I actually think Marine Biologist was the best. It was the most like actual television episode of the 3, because this one and the one we just got doing, not real TV. It's just absurd plot lines.
I'm so conflicted because I tend to think similarly that this episode, the Bizarro Jerry episode and the Chicken Roaster episode have a lot in common in their DNA in terms of like an absurdist element that is a little more prevalent. So I think the Marine Biologist is my favorite of the 3. I thought that going in though too, so I don't know if that's tainted.
And there aren't many episodes better than the Marine Biologist episode anyway, though. So that's not like damning these 2 by any means.
But I guess the kind of thing that I took away from this though is the remarkable consistency. Even in there's not a Seinfeld episode you're going to watch, or at least if you're me, and not laugh most of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, and look, I mean, I'm going to go Marine Biologist, Kenny Rogers Roasters, this one, but they're all like...
It's not far apart.
No.
On a scale of 1 to 10, it's like 8 point 9 to
It's
9.3.
like pizza. Are you really eating that much bad pizza?
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right, well, you know what? We've got a lot to cover, so why don't we just dive right into
What
this
if we
plot?
did like olives and watermelon on a pizza? That'd be pretty bad.
That would be pretty bad.
Yeah,
I can
that's
agree
not-
I
with
was
that.
just trying to come up with an idea there.
Your
And
toenails.
you went with olives and watermelon?
Yeah.
Oh. Brian,
toenails.
with toenails.
Toenails and mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Can you spit out the toenails, or do you have to swallow them?
Well, I mean, you can if you're some sort of cretin who doesn't like the flavor of a good toenail.
You
See, I like,
described
the,
me
I
to
like
a
the
T.
taste just fine, but the texture's a no-go.
What do you dip them in?
Marinara. You just have an extra cup on the
I
side.
don't know why
Obviously.
that's just bad. I don't.
Cold marinara,
Yeah,
too.
that-
not
Because it
warm
wouldn't even
marinara.
like mask it at
With
all.
some ice chunks in there, it's like
Yeah.
partially frozen marinara and toenails.
Not stirred up well. It also, it's got watery on the top.
Mamma mia!
All right, so we'll get right into this. Once again, this is the Bizarro Jerry. Now, later seasons, Spencer mentioned this on his episode of Seinfeld, would do a legit cold open with some random joke conversation or set up the characters. And this episode does exactly that. George and Jerry are reading the paper at some outdoor restaurant, and Jerry posits a question to George saying, okay, hypothetically, aliens are real and they abduct you, taking you back to their planet as a curiosity. Would you rather be in their zoo or their circus? Now, George says zoo because he doesn't want to do the work in the circus, and maybe they give him a woman to mate with. But I'm asking you guys the same question. Is it zoo or circus? What do you think, Brian?
Well, you know, when watching this, I asked myself that question, and I think it's zoo. I mean, you can just kind of hang out. But Jerry makes a valid point that you do get to travel if you're in the circus and perform. So I do see the appeal of that, and I'd imagine the conditions are horrible either way if you're an animal.
Definitely. I don't know a lot about the circus. I've never been to the circus. I've been
We
to
should
the
all
zoo
go
a bunch
sometime.
of times.
It's the greatest show in town.
I would like to know more about the circus, so I think I would join that just to learn about it.
Interesting.
I don't know much about it. I want to be a part of the circus life.
I was
more so.
certain we would all be saying zoo on this one. I'm zoo.
I've
but,
seen enough zoos.
But I get what you're saying. All right, next up, we get some cool-ass bass slaps and establishment shots. And Kramer, Jerry, and George are coming out of an elevator in some building. Kramer's here, of course, to use the restroom. And he takes off, telling the other two not to wait for him, presumably because he's going to take a monster Kramer
Oh,
shit.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Huge Kramer shit.
Just then, a beautiful woman walks into view and sits down at the desk in front of Jerry and George. The two ogle her for a minute, and Jerry tells George to maybe try his fiance's story on her. But George chickens out, and the two wind up leaving through the elevator. Obviously, just like everything with Seinfeld, it was done for a purpose, and it will come back later.
Yeah, and the fiance story, of course, for those unfamiliar,
Dead
is
Susan.
George was, engaged to a woman named Susan who died from licking an envelope he purchased
That
for
he
their wedding.
purchased because it was the cheapest in the
Yes.
book. Because George is George. Now the scene shifts to Elaine and Joxer the Mighty having lunch at the coffee shop. I put that joke in here because the actor looks like Ted Raimi. It's not. It's a completely different guy.
I
And
can see that, though.
if you look at that actor now, it looks completely different. I don't have his name in front of me, but he sure looked like Ted Raimi.
Different than
back
he
then.
did there or different than Ted Raimi?
Both,
A little bit of
probably.
both, actually. Because Ted Raimi looks like Ted Raimi did in the 90s now.
So he's aged well.
He has aged quite well. All that being mighty is really good for your skin, I guess. Well, these two are having lunch at the coffee shop, and apparently this is Kevin, who Elaine is currently breaking up with. She tells him, it just isn't quite working out and that she'd like to just be friends. Much to her dismay, Kevin seems to think this is a pretty good idea, and he just agrees. All right, let's just be friends. Back at the office building, Kramer's heard flushing the toilet and loudly yelling in pleasure, presumably from his massive Kramer-sized shit that his
It
Which
sister
reminds
has
everyone
me
made
does
him.
in a corporate building all the time.
When my big old boy cat Koopa takes a poop, he runs with delight
Gets real
sometimes
excited.
afterwards. I
I
think
bet
because
it's
he's
freeing.
freed up of his...
Yeah.
And I imagine that's kind of how Kramer felt.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Now, once he exits the shitter, he comes across a man complaining because the copier he's trying to use is jammed again. Kramer tells him that the rollers get flat spots on them.
Man, I have a note on this part because I hate
Mhm.
copiers. They always fuck up, and I don't know how to do it. And most people don't know how to use copiers anymore. That's an ancient technology.
That is true, but we're not office worker people.
No, I mean, not really. I try. I just never did well at it. And I don't like copiers.
Maybe the copier industry doesn't like you, Spencer.
Well, Kramer is good as he's so good at it that it gets him a job. Not really, but
He's the best copy guy I've seen since Rob Schneider on Saturday Night Live, in which I believe he makes copies. Is that his thing?
Well, he's making copies. He's in the process of doing
Oh,
it.
it's like a present tense
Yes,
thing, always.
absolutely. Well, Kramer shows them how to fix this problem.
Why does Kramer know how?
Couldn't tell you.
I mean, how
No
could
idea.
he possibly have
Yeah,
ever
he
gotten
fucking
that?
just bangs on
Well,
it.
that's the answer is he doesn't know how because he just pushes buttons and just smacks
it's
the
like
shit
what
out
I
of it.
did to this big old TV that Patrick Wagner gave me one time in 2004, probably.
Care to explain who Patrick Wagner
He's
is?
a guy we went to high school with. Spencer and I went to high school with. Nice guy.
Was he in the same class as Mr. Oh, I can't
Mr.
think of his name. Gideon that
No.
we brought up
No.
many times.
I don't know that he ever met Mr. Gideon, unfortunately.
It's too bad. We need to get in touch with Mr. Gideon
All
and
these
Patrick
people.
I'm
Wagner.
all
and
for
figure
Mr.
it out.
Gideon coming on the show.
Oh,
for sure.
that'd be amazing.
Well, as Kramer is doing this, a different worker peeks his head out of the nearby office and says, "Hey, Leland wants everyone in the conference room right now." So Kramer does what Kramer does, and he follows all the employees into the conference room. Meanwhile, at the coffee shop, Elaine is trying to set Jerry up with her friend Jillian, who works for the LL Bean catalog, and Jerry starts to hem and haw.
Ladies love Bean.
So Elaine produces a photograph of Jillian with her stats on the back of the picture. One of the stats, of course, is, favorite president, James K. Polk. So I have a question for you fellas. Who's your favorite president, Spencer?
Ooh, well, of course you lead with me when I need to think about it. I mean, there's so many good ones. You have Woodrow Wilson. That's like the most nondescript one ever. I mean, I've got to go with an obvious one. I've got to go with Lincoln. I mean, he was a groundbreaker. He's a pioneer.
I think they're all political creatures of convenience, slave owners and murderers, setting their evil wills upon us for their own personal gain. However, I've got to answer, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess Abraham Lincoln's the obvious one. He did a good thing at least. But I'm going to say Eisenhower, because Eisenhower had a lot of progressive ideas about the welfare implementation for our country.
You're both wrong. It's Benjamin Harrison.
Not
Best
Woodrow
president.
Wilson?
No, Benjamin
He
H.
was a
Harrison.
Harvard
I should have
educated
looked it
guy.
up before.
Not Calvin Coolidge?
No, Benjamin
He
Harrison.
has cool in his name.
We keep cool with Coolidge, and you know what? We sure did.
Yeah,
we kept
and
very
we
cool.
haven't even talked about Rutherford B. Hayes, the coolest name anyone's
That's a
ever
pretty cool
had.
name.
What is Rutherford being? B. Hayes.
And not related to Michael P.S. Hayes either.
Now, George takes a look at this picture and has the idea to take the photo and show it off, claiming that this woman was his now dead fiancée, Susan. So let's take a listen to George's rationalization here and find out what his
The
plan
look on
is.
his face, too, of delight.
I told my engagement story to that receptionist. I told her this was my fiance.
What?
Don't you see? Women like that are like members of a secret tribe living in a forbidden city. People like me have not been inside in thousands of years. But with this, it's like I've already been with one of her own. My hand's been stamped. I come and go as I please.
The plan is in motion.
Elaine's
Another one.
response to this is so good. When she's like, "Oh, let me tell the queen bee you've cracked it."
We've got to move the headquarters. Now, George does make his way back to that same office building, and that same beautiful woman is sitting at the desk. And this time, George does have the confidence and the picture to get himself a date out of it.
To accidentally dump the picture at her.
Yes.
And that it works that she actually picks it up. It's like, oh, she's beautiful.
Mhm. He tells her, "Hey, I'm here to see Mr. Art Vandelay." And she's like, "There's no Art Vandelay here." He says, "Well, hold on. Let me look at the name and verify it." And bloop, there goes the picture right onto her lap. He tells her, of course, that it was his fiancée, Susan, who died tragically. She buys into it hook, line, and sinker. There's a little joke here, though, where behind George, a meeting in the business room wraps up with Kramer in it. And he says, like I always say, you don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle.
He's got a good point.
Really nice moment here from Jason Alexander of just kind of looking over like, what?
What
just,
the fuck?
He
Yeah,
didn't
he
expect
recognizes the
Kramer to be
voice.
there. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
so great.
Now we next head to a restaurant where Elaine's friend Jillian is waiting for Jerry. And she's, of course, a beautiful woman because that's all Jerry dates. I guess arguably you could say he dated the woman who in the bad light, the Two-Face woman.
Yeah.
But that's it. Otherwise, it's all beautiful women for Jerry Seinfeld. Well, he reaches out to shake her hand, and he is met with the meatiest paw you've ever seen. And the shock on his face is palpable.
And this is the plot of this grouping in this episode that tickles you the most, right, Van?
It is. I don't know. I waffle back and forth whether or not I like the Bizarro plot or whether I like the Man Hands plot. I really like the Man Hands plot
It's
because
pretty
of the
good.
way they did it.
The physicality of it as they make that be more of a point is so good.
Yes, absolutely. Jerry's actually next scene explaining to Elaine about the girlfriend's man hands at the coffee shop. And this is a gab that works kind of poorly on audio, needs to be seen, because essentially what they've done is they have the beautiful actress play the character, but every time they show her hands, it's a man with just huge hands wearing a woman's blouse and women's jewelry. Compared to Jerry's hands, these things are colossal.
Oh, the biggest hands ever. They do a great job of framing it, too.
Mm-hmm.
Another advantage of being 8 seasons into this is the show knows exactly what it is and what people might lazily say it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when they introduce their little phrase, the man hands phrase, it's done in the quickest cut possible of Jerry noticing the hands, immediately cut to him saying she's got man hands to Elaine, kind of pulling a joke on the show itself of, we've got a phrase like low talker or sidler or whatever. And instead of drawing it out, they just go right to the joke.
Dive right to it. And now it's in the vernacular of the country. It's at this scene, Elaine reveals Jerry is supposed to pick her up from the White Plains tomorrow, where she has 5 huge boxes of buttons. And that's it. They drop the buttons thing right there.
I had no idea what that was supposed to be.
Kramer is next found wearing a nice suit and banging on a whistling teapot in Jerry's apartment. When Jerry comes stumbling out of the bedroom, just bewildered, he says it's 8 a.m. What the hell are you doing? To which Kramer replies, hey, I'm working at that office, Brant Leland, where he's due by 9. Kramer says he's figured out what he's missing in life. Structure.
Yeah, I love how he's like, you may not have noticed, but I've been a bit directionless.
And this job is, of course, giving him that. He's not even being paid because he's doing this for himself.
All of the working man Kramer scenes are so good. And they're a lot like what would happen if a little kid was playing dress up for work, just in general.
And again, another example of the physical comedy ability of Michael Richards, where he's able to just pull all that off.
And just the very sight of him attempting to be like a straight-laced...
Him in a suit is just already a win immediately.
The way he carries himself as Kramer, it's just, man...
So, of course, he leaves piles of dishes and food everywhere at
I couldn't
Jerry's
even tell what he
place.
was cooking. I guess it was eggs, but I couldn't
I
tell.
don't know. It's morning food, whatever that is to Kramer.
Morning food.
That is...
I mean, that's breakfast,
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say that's a really good alternate name for breakfast.
You want to go out
Have
and
you
have
had your
morning
morning food yet?
Man, you know what I was thinking about having for morning food?
Well, we get a Kramer physicality montage here as we get the first instance of Morning Train 9 to 5 by Sheena Easton playing over this montage. They use it later when George has the Rascal scooter and when he's pretending to be handicapped at the other job, and it's great. It's a perfect song.
When he works for Play Now, I think?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great little scene. It shows that he has Ritz crackers in his business briefcase.
Which he openly admits.
Yeah,
Yes.
At the beginning, I believe Jerry asks him what's in his briefcase, and he says crackers. And I honestly didn't remember, and I was like, he surely doesn't really. And then he opens the thing during the montage, and you see rows and rows of crackers.
He's also washing his shoes at the water cooler, which is another great little scene in the montage. Next up, Jerry's on the phone with George, where George reveals the whole picture thing actually worked out. He's going to go out with that receptionist, whose name is Amanda. Elaine arrives at the apartment and looks pretty pissed off. She asks Jerry where the hell he was today. Turns out he forgot to pick her up at White Plains.
And for no good
reason at all.
That's another example of Jerry just not giving a fuck about anyone and doesn't care even after he figures out he did something wrong. Still, he's like, I was just here.
I really liked when Elaine is mentioning what her Bizarro friends will do with her. Like, Bizarro Jerry's actually a good guy. He'll go do things with me. And she mentions going to the Museum of Miniatures at one point. And Jerry's response is, that stuff is so small and stupid. He mutters under his breath. And for some reason, that line really got me.
Well, that's just it. She reveals that she had to call Kevin, the Bizarro Jerry guy. And we don't know that it's Bizarro Jerry yet. So Jerry actually explains that because of all the opposite things that he does, he is Bizarro Jerry.
He is a friend, Jerry. He's reliable. He's considerate. He's like your exact opposite.
So he's Bizarro Jerry.
Bizarro Jerry?
Yeah, like Bizarro Superman. Superman's exact opposite. Who lives in the backwards Bizarro world. Up is down, down is up. He says hello when he leaves, goodbye when he arrives.
Shouldn't he say bad bye? Isn't that the opposite of goodbye?
No, it's still goodbye.
Does he live underwater? No. Is he black?
Look, just forget the whole thing, all right?
I love her poking holes in his stuff.
And bringing up things that, like, where are these coming from in her head?
Yes.
Like, that's, it's so great.
Well, with that, we have all of the plot points officially established. Jerry is dating Man-Hands. Elaine is fed up with our main crew and wants to go with the Bizarro Jerry group. Kramer is working at some firm, and George has entered into the mythical world of hot people using his ancient powers of lying and manipulation.
Yeah, you know, when you put it that way, they actually did have quite a bit going on in this one, like multiple little subplots.
Tons of stuff here. So George and Amanda find themselves at a nightclub where George proclaims, "I always thought this was a meatpacking plant," when Amanda introduces the short, stocky, bald man to her gorgeous, tall model friends, and he immediately makes an ass of himself initially. Amanda then asks her friend, "Hey, how was Paris?" To which George jumps in and says, "You know who loved Paris? My dead fiancée, Susan." He then passes around that picture of Jillian, and all the women see how attractive she is, and then immediately accept him into their group, with one woman even asking George to dance. Now, next up is probably my favorite scene in this whole episode, and it's where Jerry is out to dinner with Jillian. The two are at a fancy restaurant, and she's absolutely obliterating a loaf of bread and asks him if he wants any, to which he says, "No thanks, I'm just not hungry." "Well, at least drink your beer, silly." She then picks up his bottle of beer and rips the cap off as Jerry mumbles, "That wasn't a twist off."
The way he says it so quietly there is perfect.
Now, next, Jillian tells Jerry he has a little something on his face, and this is Katie's favorite part of the episode.
Oh, it's really good.
Jerry tries desperately to get it himself to no avail, and she says, "Oh, I'll get it." And then we see these just monster mitts fondling Jerry's face. Turns out it's an eyelash, so she tells Jerry to make a wish, and he reluctantly does, looks up and says, "It didn't come true."
Seeing the hand directly compared to his face is a great way to frame exactly how gigantic these hands are. I don't know who they got to do those shots, like who they filmed wearing her outfit from the wrist down, but that person does have enormous hands.
That's the thing about this joke that is so perfect. It wouldn't have worked if the whole man-hands joke was just like, they're big, hairy hands or something, because the hands don't have hair on them either.
No,
like they shave the hands.
Yeah.
So but the goal is not that she has like man hands so much. I mean, that's the joke, but the real joke is that they are monstrously strong. Also,
over the top,
yeah,
and just muscular strong. Well, just then the waiter appears and drops off their meals, which includes an entire fucking lobster. And Jillian says, "Don't you just love lobster?" She takes her dukes, picks up the whole thing, cracks it in half with juices flying everywhere. And Jerry is just absolutely disgusted with this. Now, Katie wanted to point one thing out in this episode, which is imagine from Jerry's perspective, the actor Jerry Seinfeld, watching this guy in this like lady's blouse just
really
ripping
great.
apart this lobster. It's fantastic. Having been annoyed with Jerry and the crew, Elaine goes to have coffee with Kevin, a.k.a. Bizarro Jerry, at Reggie's, a.k.a. Bizarro Coffee Shop, and he is there with two other guys who look suspiciously similar. He introduces Gene, who's a short, stocky, bald man, and a tall, lanky guy, which he says they just call Feldman. At the end of the meal, Gene grabs the bill and tells them all, "Hey, I've got it covered." When they protest, he goes, No, I insist. And this is flabbergasting to Elaine because George is, of course, the most petty, money-conscious human being that has ever existed. Feldman then pipes up and says, "Hey, Elaine, what do you think about an alarm clock which automatically tells you the weather when you wake up?"
The joke here is Kramer always has half-developed, terrible business ideas. I gotta tell you, Feldman's ideas suck shit, too. An alarm clock that tells you the weather. I mean, I guess this is the 90s, so...
Well, I guess what do you have to do to see the weather? You have to, get on the Weather Channel, right? So maybe it's just because it's so much work to figure out the weather?
I don't think it's hard at all to find the weather in fucking New York City.
Or maybe the paper, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like you could just yell it out your window at somebody.
Well, once again, befuddled, Elaine says the idea is fantastic. And unlike Kramer, of course, Feldman waffles a bit and says, "Nah, it's just not practical." Kevin tells Elaine it was great, but he and Feldman have to get over to the library. And when Elaine asks, "What the hell are you doing at the library?" he goes, "Read." The next gag is one that I also really like, which Seinfeld does well, that I think a lot of people don't really enjoy, maybe. I mentioned this in the episode, a couple episodes back. It's one of those where the characters take on archetypes and roles that make absolutely no sense and are goofy, but they pull it off pretty well here. They did it, of course, in the Kenny Rogers Roasters episode where Kramer is Jerry and Jerry is Kramer. In this case, Jerry's the sad, unfulfilled housewife and Kramer's the busy businessman who doesn't pay her any attention. They're both sitting at the table and Kramer's reading the paper. Jerry mentions he's going to break it off with man-hands and Kramer just goes, "Yeah, that's nice," to just everything Jerry says. And then the two have a standard couples fight, so let's take a listen.
So, Jillian's coming over later. I'm gonna end it. Uh-huh. Those meaty paws. I feel like I'm dating George the Animal Steel.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll chain her to the refrigerator and sell tickets.
That's nice.
Kramer, put the paper down. You never listen to me anymore. We hardly even talk.
Well, we're talking now,
I
aren't
see
we?
you for 20 lousy minutes
Oh,
in
here
the
we
morning.
go.
And then when you come home at night, you're always exhausted. We never do anything anymore.
What are you starting with me for? You know this is my crazy time of year.
It's your third day.
Yeah, I just, for whatever reason, adore this
It's
scene.
really great. There's also another thing happening in this episode that I just think is amazing, which is the three non-Jerrys in the episode.
That's my favorite 90s band. What's up?
Hey, what's happening? Elaine, George, and Kramer are all, in a sense, thinking that they're bettering themselves and distancing themselves from their group dynamic. Kramer with the job, George with his model friends, and Elaine with her new Bizarro friend group. All of three of them are in it for some dumb reason, though, and that is true to their real character, which means they belong in the original friend group.
Now, next up, George is at home blow drying his hair with, as Brian mentioned earlier, a massive picture of Dennis Franz taped to his bathroom
It's his
door.
fashion idol, I'd assume.
He keeps glancing back to look at as he blow dries his curls and spends time cultivating his look.
Hey, what did he do with his hair in this episode? He NYPD blew it dry.
Did you write that in your notes?
No, that's right out
That's
of my...
all coming out right now.
This is what the people pay for.
Pretty impressive. Now,
Oh, wait, this is free.
now the phone rings and George sets down the running hairdryer on the counter to answer it. It's Amanda, and George, with his newfound confidence, tells her they should just be friends, and he pushes her off the phone. Meanwhile, that picture of Jillian that he was pretending to be Susan, has since caught fire thanks to his hairdryer that he left on the counter.
It's what the Franz wanted him to do.
Back at Jerry's apartment, Jillian has arrived. Jerry's breaking up with her, and he says they should just be friends. She reluctantly says, oh, okay. Well, do you still want to go see a movie later? He goes, I'd love to, but we're just friends. She says, all right, I should go. But first, I'm going to wash my hands.
Oh, my God.
What?
This is going to provide my favorite hand
It's
moment.
great.
Oh, yes. It is a great
It
moment.
even has like a little cracking sound.
Mhm.
Oh,
She heads to the bathroom, the phone rings, and it's George. In a panic, he screams at Jerry about the burned picture, and he absolutely has to have a new one, otherwise he won't be able to get back into the Forbidden City. Jerry does one of those long-running gags that they do a lot in the show that I love, is anytime George calls him and with something stupid, he goes, who is this?
makes me laugh every time.
And
Every
George
single
always
time.
gets so pissed.
Yeah, and George freaks out about it. My favorite hand thing is actually they purposefully up the mic of her washing her hands like it's
Yeah,
it's
you can
fish
hear
flopping around in a
Yes,
stream.
so loud.
It's so funny, and Jerry makes like a revolted look.
And when she goes in there, he does another one of his muttering things. He's like, there's a beach towel in there somewhere.
Well, Jerry says, I'll get you that new picture if you agree to take me with you to that club. George caves in.
Yeah, because earlier George just is like too cool for Jerry at one point. Like, what would you even wear?
Yeah, he makes fun of him like he's actually there because of his appearance. Like George is in that group because of how he looks.
And Jerry has to point out, I am dating the girl in the photo.
Well, hanging up the phone, Jerry sneaks over to Jillian's purse on the couch and starts thumbing through it just as he finds another picture and says, got it. We see that big old mammoth fist clutch his comically weak wrist, and he lets out just this soft little whimper noise. And there's, like Spencer said, the bones cracking because of how powerful this woman's hands are. The scene cuts and Kramer enters Jerry's dark apartment late at night, only to be met with Jerry sitting silently, arms crossed at the table with a couple of plates and a glass of wine there. Kramer apologizes and asks what happened to Jerry's hand, which is wrapped up, and he says, what do you care? Kramer apologizes and says he had to stay late, and Jerry complains about his dinner for two, which was ruined because Kramer
Dramatically
didn't call.
dumps it out.
So over the top. Kramer clutches his side in pain. The two realize all the stress from the job is causing Kramer to get an ulcer. Kramer comes to his senses and tells Jerry they can do whatever he wants tonight. And Jerry says, let's go to the coffee shop.
He gets
I'll
so
call
excited.
George.
He's so happy about that.
Man, I love that dynamic. I'm with you, Van. That they did such a good job with it.
The whole feeling in this episode that Jerry feels like everyone's pulling away and doing their own thing and leaving him alone. You could see how thrilled he is when he gets a sense of it coming back together in this scene. Like a little
I also
kid.
like when they portray Jerry as needy, because he always is.
Yeah.
The second he doesn't have what he wants. And in this episode, everyone else is uninterested in him.
On the street headed to the coffee shop, Jerry, George, and Kramer see Elaine heading their way, and they flag her down. George says maybe she can get him another picture of man hands. Just as they call out to her, we see coming into focus behind her a second trio calling out. It's Kevin, Gene, and Feldman. There's some great camera work here as they frame the two groups on opposite sides of one another with Elaine in the middle. She introduces the original crew to the new guys and has to make a decision about which group to join. She initially starts to talk to Jerry, George, and Kramer when they start bitching about their current pointless problems, and Elaine realizes how terrible they are. She thinks her true place is with the much nicer Bizarro crew.
George is immediately starting in about like, you need to steal a photo of your friend for me.
Yeah, and then the great thing there is how George tries to abandon the group too. When she picks the other one, he's like, "Can you take me with you?"
I'm sorry, we already have a George. Kramer's storyline wraps up next as he's called in the office of Mr. Leland, who tells him he's been reviewing his work and, quite frankly, it stinks. It's almost like he's had no business experience at all. He's sorry he's going to have to let Kramer go. To which Kramer replies, "But I don't even really work here." And Mr. Leland says, "Well, that's what makes this so difficult."
So clearly this entire time he's known that. He doesn't even build up to it till Kramer forces his hand, essentially. Like, I'm not even an employee.
What a great part of the joke that the boss is aware of it.
Yeah, he's known the whole time.
And totally cool
and
with it up to
this point. He
goes
still goes through that whole speech of letting him go.
No other sitcom would have handled this plot line that way.
No, not at all.
That's just so great.
Unable to procure another picture of Manhands, George finds his way back to the Mystical Club and begins hitting on a beautiful model. And she asks, "Are you even supposed to be here?" George says, "Of course, I used to come here all the time with my dead fiancée, Susan, back when it was a meat packing plant." He unfolds like a 9x9 picture of a woman that was clearly cut out of a magazine
with
and hands it
text
to
on
her.
the back of it.
Yes, absolutely. And she points out, that picture is me from a Clinique ad I recently did. George kind of hems and haws a little bit, and a burly bodyguard grabs him by the arm and says, "This is a private party. Let's go, sir." And he is thus ushered out of the Hot People's Club.
Forever.
Okay, we're in the home stretch here. Our next scene is phenomenal. I love this scene. We find Elaine arriving at Bizarro Jerry's apartment, which is painstakingly the exact opposite replica of Jerry's apartment. The door's on the left, the kitchen's on the left, the bathroom's at the end of the stage, directly in front of the camera. There's a bookshelf and stereo on the opposite side of where Jerry's is. There's even a statue of Bizarro Superman where Jerry's Superman statue is. It's just, they did such a great job of set design.
I really noticed that this time more than ever before.
Me too.
How much it was the mirror image of Jerry's place.
I feel like as a kid, I was always focusing on how the characters were acting opposite, and I wasn't picking up on
the
like,
little
the
nuances
scene.
you could miss and stuff like that. Because I didn't remember that part about this episode, but it's very obvious when you watch it now.
Mm-hmm. Kevin and Gene are quietly sitting on the couch and reading, and after Elaine announces she's at the door, Kevin gets up to unlock the 6 or 7 locks he has on there.
No one can barge in.
No, which is, as you guessed, at the exact opposite, of course, of Jerry's apartment. Kevin gives her a big hug as she comes in, and she looks around the apartment in wide-eyed bewilderment. She sees the computer by the window exactly opposite of where it is at Jerry's. She sees that there's a unicycle hanging on the wall where Jerry's bike would be. Elaine goes to toss her purse onto the chair at the table, but catches herself because she tries to do it where she would at Jerry's, but then switches sides and tosses it to her left onto the seat. She brazenly wanders into the kitchen, opens the fridge, and pulls out a jar of olives when Kevin asks her, "What are you doing?" "Eating olives."
I found that line read so charming.
Mm-hmm.
Just eating olives.
Eating olives. And
very enthusiastically.
Kevin goes, "Ever hear of asking?" Much to her dismay.
And at this point, the show doesn't really play it this way. I'm sorry, but Kevin's a dick.
Yeah, he kind of is. I mean, who cares? If it's your friend, eat whatever. You guys can eat whatever's in my house. I don't care. Just not Bean. Don't eat the cat.
No, she's too wonderful a cat.
Sinewy. Just then the doorbell rings and Kevin and Gene give each other a perplexed look as Kevin says, "Who is it?" And we hear a voice say, "It's Feldman." From across the hall.
Then everyone nods in recognition.
Yeah, a smile crosses Kevin's face. He unlocks and opens the door, and Feldman politely enters and shakes Kevin's hand in greeting. He says, "Hey, look who I ran into." And next
this is great.
A very portly, glasses-clad FedEx driver enters the frame and says flatly, "Hello, Kevin." To which Kevin replies, "Hello, Vargas." Then the two, of course, let out a belly laugh. They smile. They start shaking hands. And Kevin asks if Vargas wants to catch a ball game this weekend. Vargas says, great. Well, I'll see you later. And he takes off. I just love the fake Newman.
Yeah, that is great.
Feldman excitedly reveals that he got all the gang tickets to the Bolshoi this weekend, which, by the way, is the Russian Ballet Academy in New York, if you didn't know.
I didn't.
Elaine's, of course, psyched up for this, and in her excitement, she does what she always does.
Get
her
out.
Traditional, get out! And violently pushes Kevin to the ground. Gene and Feldman rush to the aid of the now injured Kevin, and Elaine apologizes and says, Kevin, I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? And Gene gives her this dramatic little, haven't you already done enough?
Yeah, that's a great line.
At this moment, Elaine realizes her place is not with this polite group of nice people. She doesn't belong with rational, kind individuals. No, her place is among the sick, twisted villains that we've all come to know and love so far across 8 seasons. She goes to exit the apartment, but of course struggles to leave because of the locks she's simply not used to dealing with. To wrap up George's storyline next, he takes Jerry to the Sexy People Club, but something's a little off. The two enter the room to find sawdust on the ground and just giant cuts of meat hanging from the ceiling, and it's clearly a meat packing plant. And as they turn to leave, George steps on the very picture he was using the prior night, confirming that it is the same place, but mere shitty mortals like Jerry and George are not welcome. I like the mysticism element to
it's
this.
like the lost city of Atlantis or something.
That's a nice touch for sure.
Our final scene here is our hot close for the episode, and we find ourselves back at Kevin's apartment. So let's take a listen here as we find out just how different this group of Finns is than our usual crew.
At work today, I discovered there's a payphone in the lobby that has free long distance.
Oh, so what did you do?
I called the phone company and immediately reported the error.
Nice. Who is it?
Feldman, from across the hall.
Hold on.
Kevin, brought you some groceries.
Again? Feldman, you didn't have to do that.
Hey, what are friends for?
You know, I may not say this enough, but you two are about the best friends a guy could have. Oh. Me so happy. Me want to cry.
And with that, the Bizarro Jerry is done. I just absolutely love the kookiness of the opposite group.
I really enjoy the dumb little intro squirt music as well, and an outro as a parallel to the slap bass.
Well, actually, I have a special thing for you guys because when I was doing my research on this episode, and I have some fun facts later about how it was written and some other stuff, there were like a dozen websites who were like, it's the Seinfeld theme reversed. It clearly is not the Seinfeld theme reversed. So I actually have proof that it's not. But it's I don't understand how anyone can be like, oh, that's clearly the Seinfeld theme reversed. So anyway, here we go. First off, we have the Bizarro Jerry theme.
At work today.
Next up, we have the Bizarro Jerry theme completely reversed. That would be the Seinfeld theme if it was reversed.
Yeah,
it's not.
That is. Okay.
Further to prove it, here's the Seinfeld transition theme. And here is that exact same theme reversed. So as you can see,
yeah,
it
it's
is
not really
not
that
at all the
different
same
reversed. It sounds kind of similar.
Yeah, that's clearly the theme song to Full House.
So there you go. I have proved you wrong. Wikipedia.
Yeah, fuck you, Wikipedia.
Signpedia, and like a dozen other sites.
Can't we
It
just
was
go in and edit
fascinating
the
when he had that.
Wikipedia? Isn't just
Probably.
anyone able to edit Wikipedia?
I think you have to sign up, but
Oh,
yes,
we can sign up. Boob Tube Boys can start becoming.
Yeah, because like all sports fans do this thing, and I admit I thought it was funny the first time I saw it, where if a player has a good game or series or whatever against another team, they'll go onto the opposing team's thing and be like, Michael Jordan is my owner of the Milwaukee Bucks or whatever because he totally pwned them.
I see.
Yeah, and everybody thinks it's fucking hilarious. And again, I did the first time I saw it, but everyone still does it. Stop doing
it's
that,
gotten
guys.
Real old at this point. All right, a couple quick notes. We'll talk about the episode and then give you the information as to what we'll be covering next.
Yeah, probably a show just as good as Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah, certainly
Maybe
just
better.
as good. Maybe even 10 times better.
Oh my
That's how
God.
good it is.
90 times better. Who knows?
So the guy who portrayed the man-hands, you mentioned this earlier, Spencer, it's a crewman, a productions assistant named James Ricart. He's worked on a bunch of stuff.
They just had him available on the crew.
Which I think is great. If you've got the boom operator or whatever, just, hey, do you want to do this? You've got big masculine hands. Do this. I think it's fantastic. Sure. I love that they did that.
I'm sure, like, if I was working on the crew of a show, I bet I would think it was amazing if I got to do a little cameo thing in some way.
I mean, that's a fact that guy can give out to anyone.
Oh, yeah.
Man hands.
If you're watching that episode of them, too, I bet he's just always pointing out, there I am. Look at my hands right there.
Behind-the-scenes information. It's like, well, in this scene, let me give you my motivation.
James, could you open this jar of pickles for me? You better believe I could. I'm man hands.
David Mandel was the writer of this episode, and he used multiple real-life events for the plot. His wife, Rebecca, was very self-conscious of her hands, which she referred to as farm hands. She grew up in the Midwest. So that's the
impetus for the idea.
Yep. And then sometimes when visiting Tower Records, Mandel was often confused for an employee because he was knowledgeable and just help anyone that's, looking through CDs or whatever, which is what influenced the Kramer storyline. So I feel like Brian could have been that at CD Warehouse.
I would. That was like my dream.
And Justin doing
to get to make minimum wage at CD Warehouse, so I could be a big snob about music at people.
Absolutely. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for Seinfeld week. Do you guys have anything you want to say about this episode? Did you like it overall? Did you hate it? Where does it rank in the echelon of Seinfeld episodes?
I mean, it kind of talked about it earlier with this whole season being this way. It's very silly. It's very out there, but I can't say it's not a lot of fun to watch. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Definitely a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed some of the character dynamics. Like I said, I enjoy any time when some of the characters selfishly believe they're going to leave the friend group or something like that, because you can always see exactly how misguided their reasoning for it is. It's never towards actual self-betterment. It's almost like, I'm important now.
Well, this episode did a very good job proving and showing how villainous our main crew is.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't belong elsewhere. They belong together because they're so villainous. So I did like that aspect of it. I picked this episode because Katie wanted me to do it because she loves the man-hands subplot, and I do as well. I think ultimately, like I said, the worst Seinfeld episode is still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I would have gone with a different one that I wanted to cover because this isn't certainly my favorite, but I think it fits the mold of good Seinfeld, but goofy, like we've discussed in these later seasons for sure.
I'll kind of just pitch in because I don't have a lot to add to what you guys said, but this is definitely very emblematic of 8th season Seinfeld, which certainly goofier, still really, really funny, still all over the place. I feel very similarly about this episode as to how I felt about the chicken roaster, because it just has a really similar feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, only a few episodes apart in syndication, so it makes sense.
By this time, we've talked about how well all these episodes are written and the show's writing staff expands, but one thing I found really fascinating is how many of the early episodes were written either by Larry and Jerry only, or just even Larry in some instances. We mentioned The Contest, which is probably the most famous Seinfeld episode.
I really thought one of us would pick it, but, it's good that we didn't because everyone probably is very familiar with that one.
Written entirely by Larry David.
Really?
Which is kind of incredible.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Which shows you the magic of Seinfeld, which is, this is an idea from Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld that they were mostly helming, but their little universe they built then enabled them to hire a writing team that loved and understood that universe. So the later seasons, even when they're not explicitly writing, and certainly not as often, they still feel like Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
which is a real testament to what they built.
Once you establish the foundation like that's a kind of a thing like The Simpsons had. Matt Groening didn't really write anything past, I think, first couple seasons. You establish the universe and you get the characters' identities established, and I think talented writers can kind of take it from there at that point, and the spirit lives on no matter who's working on it, as long as you get the right talent.
Yeah, and I don't know that I feel that way. I don't know that I feel that it works a lot of the time.
No, it probably doesn't. An example of The Simpsons is an outlier. That's an outlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not common.
And I think that's anytime a show makes it work, there's a degree of, well, you can't fuck this up to it in terms of how well the show's foundation
Exactly,
is built.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for Seinfeld week. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun doing it. Seinfeld's great. I will continue watching Seinfeld as we go along.
Yeah, I'm going to be on a kick for a little while, I think. Unless I get really into our next show and can't stop watching it.
You might, because there's plenty of content for you to get into. Probably hasn't been on as long, but there's probably 1,000 times more content for it because of how they just unabashedly put this shit out there. If I haven't played my hand yet, I don't really care for what we're about to do, but it's important that we do it, so I'm going to transition right into that. You know, ladies and gentlemen, not only am I a host of the Boob Tube Boys, I'm also, I guess, a small business owner of the Bootu Inc. network.
Yeah.
And sometimes as a small business owner, you have to think promotional. And that's exactly what I have done. I've decided I want to target a show.
Who are we merging with?
We are merging with the Seinfeld pod. We're merging with the Not a Lady, a Dr. Quinn podcast.
And also 3M for
That's
some
right.
reason.
And we now have multi-billion-dollar budgets to put out
It
shows.
sounded like a big company announcement there for a second.
Well, I have decided that it's time to talk a show that has a rabid fan base because I need more Bootu Boys fans.
Yeah.
What better show than, aside from Seinfeld, that has a rabid fan base than the reality show 90 Day Fiancé?
Yes, what better show?
Oh, I fucking hate 90 Day Fiancé. And here's the thing, we're not even going to cover 90 Day Fiancé. They're, in fact, the spin-off series.
One of them's from Bones.
Oh, yeah, that'll happen later. One of them is from the spin-off series Before the 90 Days, which I guess covers people before they have the contract. We'll get into it later.
Wow.
And then we also have one from
Complicated.
90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After.
Okay,
which
so we got a
revisits.
prologue and the epilogue then, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The beauty of this
All
is we're
bread,
going to
no
see,
meat.
We're going to see basically 2 episodes covering a couple early on in their relationship and a later episode covering their relationship later on. And
Cool.
Oh boy. So let me give you the episodes here. We're going to do season 1, episode 9, Red Flags Before the 90 Days. And here we go. Sean finally meets Abby's ex-boyfriend in an emotional showdown. Jesse and Darcy reach a breaking point. Courtney is suspicious about Antonio's womanizing ways. Paul reveals a big secret to Carini, leading to a dangerous encounter in Brazil. Oh boy.
Wow. That sounds scary.
Lots of intrigue.
And then our second episode of 90 Day Fiancé we'll be covering is Happily Ever After, Season 5, Episode 4, She's a Wolf. Elizabeth's new discovery threatens the wedding. Colt comes clean to his mother. Carini, so again, this is the couple we're covering both episodes, discovers more about Paul's America. Angela is desperate for a witness. Larissa makes a surprising call. Kalani and her mother go head-to-head with the Swelu.
Now, does anyone turn into a werewolf?
I was going to say, and this
They
is
do.
the happily ever after part here. This is, it doesn't sound that promising.
Fun fact, they're never happy.
Couldn't be.
We just talked about Seinfeld, which the characters are villains. Guess what? They're all villains in 90 Day Fiancé. They are all monstrous, evil, vile people.
I'm fully prepared to look on in horror.
Ugh, it's bad. The main couple that we wanted to cover is a pair of people named Paul, who's from Kentucky, I believe, and Carini, who's from Brazil, like the most remote part of Brazil. And they are a train wreck of a couple. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you guys out there want to
Kinda
watch
excited, to be
this
honest.
show, you should be. Check it out on Discovery Plus. And Amanda Vaughn, your sister Brian, is doubly excited for these episodes because she watches the show as well. And maybe you'll get to hear a little bit from
you just
Mandy.
might hear another voice on this podcast for once.
Thank God, I'm really sick of you guys and myself. I'm sick of all of us.
What if we just replaced us as the cast of this show?
I mean, the spirit would. Do you think we built a foundation to where the spirit would continue without us,
This
like
is the
Seinfeld
thing, like
did?
the writers,
No, they
you can
will
bring
be
in new.
complaining about Brian 2 for years.
Well, that's going to do it once again for Seinfeld Week. Hopefully you guys are interested in hearing 90 Day Fiancé. You can find us all over the place on Twitter.
Everywhere.
I am at Manly Van Lee. Spencer is, what are you?
The number 3 French_hen.
And Brian is some bullshit.
It's Out Loud Guitar Brian, and don't you fucking replace me with Sarah Chalk.
Just you wait. We will. You can also find the show's account at Boob Tube Boys. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok.
I wish we were.
We're TikTok kids now. We're
Yeah.
everywhere. And if you really like what we do, and you do if you're listening, you should head on over to patreon.com/Bootu Inc, where for just $2 a month or more, you can get access to bonus content. We have all kinds of stupid shit on there. It's a little more freeform. We also have some structured shit on there as well. So Go check that out, folks. Give us your money. Make us all happy. We've got to feed Brian's unruly coke habit.
Yeah. This
And his
nose
unruly cat.
isn't going to stay full without your help.
So that's it, boys. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think we covered it all. I really enjoyed this. Seinfeld Week was a success.
Yeah, I think it worked out well, and I just would like to reiterate again, I swear to God, if I see you auditioning a second Brian, I will lose my shit. And I'll do so publicly.
We do know that if we do audition another Brian, it's going to be a little boy.
You have to.